Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today. It's promptly 12:30 Eastern Time here. We're going to go ahead and get started momentarily. We're here to talk about voiding checks in Church Windows accounting today. So, for a few things before we get started, click on the little red arrow on the sidebar of your control panel to either minimize the webinar control panel. This is particularly important if you have a single monitor set up for your computer, or drag that control panel off to your second desktop if you've got a dual monitor, two monitors or more. Gets that out of the way. Again, allows you to see everything that we're doing here today. We are recording today's webinar event. The video of today's event will be out on our website either later today or sometime tomorrow. Albeit we do have a previous video from 2017 or 18 or something, I think, out there on the same topic that you can certainly revisit. Covers exactly the same thing. There is a handout for today's webinar event, so if you click the little arrow next to your handouts, you can find that accounting voiding checks document. That is the document that I am using as the printed guide for today's webinar event. It is also on the Support Center page on voiding checks as well. So if you don't happen to download or print that right now, you can go back and visit that or get that off the Support Center page later if you wish. We're going to be here till, about 10 minutes till 1 today. I'll try to, slam through the material as much quickly as I can here with as much detail as possible. If you have questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel. I'll do my best to keep an eye on those. And if I don't get to answering them during the event, I'll certainly be happy to stick around and answer those after the event has concluded. If you've at any point seen what you came to see in the webinar today, feel free to choose File, Exit, Leave Webinar. Thank you so much in advance for attending. We hope that you find that these webinar events are helpful. So, it's literally a page and a half document, folks. It's not terribly long document at all. So the very first thing that talks about on the document there is it says, please note if you're voiding a paycheck that is outside the current 941 quarter in payroll, do not go into payroll, make any voids adjustments because of tax implications, okay? If you're going to reissue a payroll check, that's all going to be dealt with in accounting. We're not going to cover that today. We've got an actual video and a document out on our website about, reissuing a lost, say, payroll check, but that's a different topic from today. Or if you have questions about that and it's involving paychecks and payroll, please call us through the support number, or email us at support@churchwindows.com, okay, for further assistance on that, okay? But we're not going to be covering the lost payroll check today, okay? All right, so before we get into topic number one here, or option number one for voiding a check, there are so many scenarios. I've been doing this a long time, folks, and so one of the things I've learned about voiding checks is there are any number of circumstances where voiding a check could be required or needed, okay? Whether it's a check from last month or last quarter or earlier in the year or last year or 2 years ago, okay? Those all impact how we're going to deal with voiding a check. Do we need to reissue a new check a replacement check for the lost check, that we're voiding out, okay? All basically learning to ask yourself certain questions about the voiding the check itself, the check you're voiding, is really important to understanding the correct and proper steps to voiding the check, okay? So, the very first thing we're going to see here under option number one, when it says voiding a check from a prior period, month, or year that will not be reprinted, okay? So again, what's the date on the original check? Am I going to be reprinting, or do I need to reprint or replace a check with a new check, okay? Those are two questions that are really, really important, okay? So this is the situation that we're talking about is occurring from the prior year. Okay, so as option number 1 talks about there under the very first bullet, it says do not, I can't stress that enough. This is true under both of these first 2 options here or scenarios, is do not go back to the prior period and reverse the transaction, okay, for a couple reasons. It would change previously reported amounts. Maybe you've already got the treasurer's report and the balance sheet accepted and published, and the church is happy with those. And the bank's reconciliations are finalized for that account in accounting for that was in that period, okay? So again, by going back and reversing that payment transaction would change all of those, could all change all of those previous reports and those bank reconciliations, okay? So, and it will, and oftentimes will compound problems by reversing those, okay, and create problems. So what we do in that situation is we do have a check. So if I'm going to go in, I'm going to go into my bank reconciliation really quick here. So let me go into my bank rec. I'm going to choose my Huntington Bank checking. I'm going to go down to my select a saved bank rec. I'm going to choose, we're a little behind here. We're going to choose our end of February bank rec. And we're going to go to next. And we're going to go to our withdrawals tab. And sure enough, right up here at the very top, I've got 2 checks, you know, one from November of 2019 and one from December of 2019 that I'm now wanting to write off or void, okay? One of which I need to replace and reissue a new check, and another one that I don't, okay? So in this case, what we're going to do, and this is really kind of covering both options number 1 and number 2. I am not going into 2019 and reversing either of those payment transactions, okay? I'm handling this all in my current reconciliation period of February of 2020, okay? And how we do that is we go up to transactions, we're going to go right across the top center to other, and we're going to choose either journal entry or adjust asset. For the purposes of our webinar, we're going to choose adjust asset. Notice it says in parentheses deposit correction, NSFs, stock valuations. You can also add in writing off or adjustments, you know, for voiding checks too. Okay, we're going to come back to this one called enter spoiled checks, check numbers later on. Okay. But we're going to go to adjust asset. Adjust asset is a journal entry as well, okay? So we're going to, when we choose the adjust asset, the advantage of using the adjust asset function is it takes the whole idea of debits and credits as they pertain to your accounts and how they affect your accounts out of the mix, okay? So first thing it asks us is to choose the asset we're going to adjust. So we're going to go down here and choose our Huntington Bank checking, and we're going to increase that account. Why? Because we're putting the money back in the system, back into our checking account and into our accounts that we can then allows us the option to go back in or the opportunity to go back in and post a new transaction in the current month, in this case February of 2020, and post a new payment and print a new check for that payee, or not, as the case may be. Okay? So in this case, we're going to increase. We're going to choose the amount to adjust. So we're going to write off the check for Don Brenner, so it was for the amount of $23.45. We're going to backdate it into our date of February 2020, because that's the month we're still reconciling. I'll make that, you know, the statement ending date for that month. You know, I'm going to put in comments of some kind, voiding, check from, 11/19 for Don Brenner, and then I'm good with that. So then under my accounts, now again, where this is important, folks, is there's no check going to be reissued for Don. He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll just, we're going to forget that." Okay. So because I'm not reissuing a new check, I'm going to actually put that back into a fund. In this case, we're going to put it back into our general operating fund. That's the fund that the expense was originally posted or was affected when I entered that bill in 2019. Why am I choosing the general fund? Because if I put $23.45 back into the expense, I'm distorting my 2020 treasurer's report, okay? So I'm not going to do that. I want to try to maintain as much accuracy on my current year's treasurer's report as possible, so I'm going to credit that $23.45 back to the original fund, okay? And so we're just going to leave that at that. And we're just adding the money back into the bank, into the accounts and church windows. So then we would go ahead and post. I'm not going to print it, okay? So now, then we're going to do option number 2, and we're going to do a similar adjust asset transaction for a check that we do need to reprint, okay? So we're going to, again, choose the Huntington Bank checking account, the account that we're adjusting. We're increasing it again. We're offsetting the original payment from the prior year by adding that amount back in, okay? So then we're going to make that the amount of this check, which in this case was $67.89. You know, and we're going to say writing off lost check from 12/19, issuing replacement check. Now, in this particular case, because I'm reissuing a new replacement check in the current year, I can go ahead and affect an expense, okay? So let me find the expense that I'm working with here. I think it was my, give me a second here, folks. I believe it was my office expense here, and I'm going to put in my $67.89 again, okay? So the account number on that is my 510450 office expense, and then I go ahead and post that, okay? Again, I'm not going to print that. So now what I can do with regards to Michelle, I could also credit it to her vendor account. There are, again, various ways you can deal with writing these off, folks, or posting these. But now I can just go now back into my enter bills, enter a new bill for Michelle, post a new payment, and print a new check in February 2019. And as long as I've debited, as long as I re-enter the 510-450, my office expense, and enter that same amount of the $67.89, you know, I credit that account $67.89, I debit it through the bill, the net effect on my current year's treasurer's report is 0. I am not impacting that at all, okay? But I'm now issuing a new replacement check in, say, February 2020 for Michelle, okay? So again, I could go in and enter a new bill, pay a new bill, debiting 510-450 for Michelle. It's a wash on the expense. Doesn't impact my 2020 treasurer's report in any way. We're not going to go through that. We don't have time, folks. Okay? So then number 3 option on our voiding checks document is voiding a check in the current month that needs to be corrected or reprinted. Okay? So what I've got there is, in that particular case, I'm now going to go up to transactions and browse. Again, this is a transaction that I'm working with in the current month. I'm not impacting any prior bank reconciliations. I'm dealing with it all in, again, February of 2020. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to find that vendor account. So we're going to do O'Brien. There's O'Brien Business Equipment. I click OK. Here's my bill and my payment from February 2020. You know, they called me and said, oh, well, we never got that check. You know, can you please send us a new one? I'm happy to do that. This is a situation where I will reverse the payment, but I'm not going to touch the bill. Well, unless the bill was the wrong amount or something. So I highlight the payment transaction, and I always tell folks to pay attention to the transaction type. So right over here, I've got my PYMT, okay? I'm issuing a new check for O'Brien Business Equipment, okay? So I'm going to reverse the payment, and I'm going to leave the bill alone, okay? So we're going to highlight that payment. We're going to click reverse. We're going to enter comments, you know, lost check, reissue new check. Click OK. It says, do you sure you want to void that or reverse that? Click yes. Okay, and that's now gone. The bill is left alone. Okay. Now, because I've reversed that payment transaction, it now shows automatically as voided in my check register. I need to do nothing else on that check. Now I can go into pay bills, quick pay, view outstanding bills, and here's my $345.67 bill ready for me to post a new payment to O'Brien Business Equipment. I can now just choose computer check, put a new check in the printer and print a new check, post a new payment, and send a new check off to them, okay? I could have corrected the bill, so if the bill amount were wrong, the vendor called me and said, hey, Josh, the check, great, thanks so much, but the payment amount was wrong. Can you please send me a new check for the correct amount? I could have reversed the payment, gone in, I could correct the bill, change it, and then go in and post a new payment and print a new check. Again, lots and lots of flexibility here around this, folks. Okay? But again, reversing that payment in, February of 2020 doesn't impact any previous bank reconciliations because it occurred in the current month. Okay? Okay, so that's what allows me the ability to do that. Again, if I'm working with checks, folks, that occurred in any previous periods where I'm either reconciled or reports are published, I'm not going to go in and reverse anything in that earlier period. I'm going to deal with it all in the current month, okay, by posting the adjusting transactions or journal entries or what have you in terms of that, okay? So now option number 4 is voiding a check in the current month that was posted in error. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that. I'm not going to post their new payment. I can go back in and do that anytime. So now I would go up to, change here, filter, and sort. And again, what I would do is I would find the vendor that was posted in error. So let's say I've got my electric bill for February that was posted by mistake. So here I would find my bill and my payment. So right here, I would find my February 14th bill. I would reverse that. I would enter comments of some kind, click OK, click Yes. It then says it's been reversed. Then I would then do the same thing with the subsequent payment. Highlight that, click Reverse, entering comments, click OK. Now when I've reversed that, I go into my check register. That transaction, now that check number has a void status on it automatically. Anytime the check number was associated with the payment transaction, folks, reversing that payment will put a void status on your check register automatically, okay? But again, you don't want to go in and reverse payments and bills, especially if they're in reconciled or closed periods. So just from a technician's perspective, folks, Church Windows does not have a monthly close. It has a hard annual close for the accounting year. Again, though not required. But to me, what closes the month is my bank reconciliation. If that bank rec is finalized, I'm not reversing anything or touching anything with regards to my asset account, okay? So that's why I'll deal with those types of transactions all in the current month. And option number 5, with a couple of minutes left, is record a check or a spoiled or damaged check. So that's a situation, folks, where if I did go in and I entered a bill and I paid it, and then I'm at the print checks window and I'm printing that check, and say I printed it on the wrong side, okay, or the printer destroyed the check during the printer process. When I closed out of my print checks window and it said, did the check print correctly, I clicked no. So that check number was never associated with the payment transaction, okay? So even if I reverse the payment, it still wouldn't put a void status on that check. That's what I'm going to go up to Transactions, Other, and enter my spoiled check numbers for, is it's going to allow me to put a voided check in my check register with a $0 amount that has that check number and it says void on it, okay? So I would put in my check number, 6610 or something, or whatever the check number is. I would say, destroyed in printer, and I would post that, okay? One of the things that really, really triggers auditors about, potential for fraud is gaps in check sequences in your check register. So if you have a check, what I would do is if that check was destroyed, I would write void on it. I would put it in my folder in my drawer. And so when an auditor asks me, hey, can you show me your voided checks, I can pull out that folder and show them that these checks are accounted for. Gaps in check sequences are red flags for auditors. So that's why we have this function in the software. So if, again, your print checks are destroyed in the printing process or ruined and they're considered unpresentable, you can still put those in there account for them in your check register. And when being asked, you can present them to auditors as well. Well, not lost checks per se quite so much, but in this case, you can explain that as well, especially when the check doesn't clear the bank. All right, folks, that's our topic for the day.